Hey, Quants, I'm taking a little break from doing some coding work, and I just want to go over something that I've been thinking about recently that's a little bit different than some of the BTC analysis that I've been doing, but related to the macro ideas that I have around the 4-year cycle and also the 18.6-year land cycle. And so this will be a marriage of those two. So before I start, I just want to put a question out to everybody. I personally do a lot of PineScript coding, and I use the PineScript editor, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't know if anybody's really enjoying that, but they did have an update that they mentioned in August that they'd be doing where you would be able to put the editor over to the right side of the screen. And so that's what we're looking at in the screen here. I don't have access to that yet. I'm just curious if anybody else has access to that, because this is how I would like to code, because I use a widescreen monitor, and this would save me a lot of real estate when I'm coding for how I like to develop. So if anybody has access to that, please let me know in the comments below. And let's move on to the other analysis that I would like to look at. So make sure I have focus on the screen. So, and what I'm going to talk about here is the 4-year cycles and also the 18.6-year land cycle. So in the context of the 4-year cycles, it's been proposed that you would also have a macro cycle inside of that that extends 16 years. So you would have 4-year cycles that make up one 16-year cycle. And in that context, you would have 3 right translated cycles and 1 left translated cycle. So I'm going to play with that idea a little bit today. And then on the 18.6-year land cycle theory, that is, of course, 18.6 years. The last one was in 2008. We had the crash. It peaked in 2007. You had the 2008 Great Financial Crisis crash, and then we recovered out of that. And so I did put an image on here for individuals who are not familiar with that. The idea right now would be that we would expect a top in 2026 or 2027 timeframe. And that, so just hovering my cursor here, that would put us pretty close to the summit right now, but not exactly there yet because we're still in 2025. So what I've put on the chart here is I've actually put times from top to top. And so I've only done this simply because it was clean. If you measure bottom to bottom, or you're going to end up with similar time frames. So just for the way that I'm doing this, just so it's clear, I measured this previous top. So this doesn't go all the way back to the whole history, because it doesn't get some of the bottoms that we would have prior to the 2011, since this was in 2013. So that's why I'm starting the top. And then the next top goes to 2017, and then again starting from there going to the next top in 2021, and then starting from there the top from 2021 to what may be the top now. So you've probably seen a lot of people doing some of this, saying, the top's in, we've hit all our time, and I cannot necessarily disagree with that. If we look at the previous one from 2013 to 2017, that was 211 bars. I am on the weekly time frame, by the way, but that's 1,477 days. And then on the next one, we have 204 bars, which is 1,428 days. And then consequently, this was also the current cycle from 2021 to 2025 was 204 bars, 1,428 days if you're measuring top to top. So that is interesting. If you're wondering how I'm getting these, because I haven't seen anybody showing these, if you draw that arrow chart, you can actually adjust the settings so that the stats just show the bar ranges and the date time. There's other values you can use on here if you're actually measuring price action and stuff like that. But just something I found was interesting, a way to illustrate this that I haven't seen other people using. So with all this in mind, let's go ahead and make the assumption that we have seen the top for the 2025 cycle. So going to back to the concept of having 16 years in where there are 4-year cycles in each one, with the last one being a left translated cycle, I would count this one as the first one, the second one, the third one, and now if we're in the fourth one, what would that mean if we're going to have a left translated cycle? So the idea is we would see the peak in the first half of that cycle. So we've already seen some price start to move down. And what I did was I went from the top. If we have the exact same time as the previous two cycles, it would be 204 bars, 1,428 days. And then I just took half of that, which is 102 bars. And so we would need to see a peak, or we would expect to see a peak before this time. And so when is this time? It is, I could just move my cursor out of the way because I have a horizontal bar on there, or a vertical bar on there. It would be September, it would be Monday the 20th of September 2027. And so that is not actually calling out the day when the peak would occur. This is just saying if we're going to have a left translated cycle, the peak would need to occur before then. And so if that were to occur, it actually falls right in line with the speculation that the 18.6-year land cycle is going to be sometime in 2026 or 2027. This isn't specifying what catalysts might cause that to occur, right? We've seen a number of things occur in the macro environment, in the political environment, right? We had the government shutdown. If you're looking at Polymarket, we expect the government shutdown is going to end within the next 2 to 3 days. We have potentially quantitative easing starting in December. We have Fed rates potentially being lowered in December. We also have the potential for the Fed chair being replaced in, I believe, April timeframe, so early 2026. And these are, and also the fact that Donald Trump and Bessent have confirmed the potential, it's not guaranteed, of course, to have stimulus checks coming out, which might not necessarily be stimulus checks, but might be other forms of economic incentives for individuals that are lower income. And so all that to say there is the potential for between now and early 2026 to have an influx of liquidity into the market, which could help drive this potential for a left translated cycle or a peak in sometime between 2026 and 2027. So just wanted to share this idea. If this does happen, I did have the fib on here. So again, assuming that we have already topped, I drew a fib retracement from the bottom of the start of this cycle. So I know these lines were top to top. Just to clarify, this is from the bottom of the current cycle all the way to the top of the current cycle. And if we're looking at potential targets from that fib, we have very basically 84,000. We've already touched 100,000, right? So, and we pierced that a little bit, right? So the next fib would be 84,000. If we're looking at the GAN potential here, it would be 70,000, just under 71,000, and then potentially 57,000. Of course, you could keep going down. Now, this is kind of going into the concept of potentially using fractals, and there's no validity in using this in my opinion. But if I were to just eyeball this, one thing I would say is, how much time do you have to go down before you actually make a peak? And so if I were going to draw some, prediction lines or some guesses here, how far or how long could price continue to track down before then seeing a top? Well, the reality is it doesn't really matter how far it goes down, because if it were to do this would still be a left translated cycle, and it just went down for most of the time, right? Now we saw a peak. Nobody's going to be happy with that peak, but it would still fulfill the concept of having a left translated cycle, right? If we're looking at something more bullish, I think you might predict, or you might expect us to be already fairly close to the bottom. Maybe we don't even get all the way down here, but if we did, that could potentially be a very fast, it could be very fast in terms of time. And again, being a left translated cycle, there's no guarantee that a left translated cycle has to be higher than the previous top, but it certainly could be, right? So we could come up here, top out. Again, nobody's going to be happy with not seeing a new all-time high. Again, this is all just speculation here, right? So if we could see it, maybe we see a shallow drop and then we actually do get a new all-time high. Of course, I think that would make people a lot more euphoric, which could set in some of that euphoria. Maybe we see a lot more greed in that case, and then we see a big dip. So Something like that, just psychologically, would seem to make more sense to me to drag more people into the market as we approach the end of the 18.6-year land cycle. One of the general ideas is that everybody needs to be in the market to be fueling the speculation before it drops, before the bottom drops out. So assuming people still put liquidity and money into the Bitcoin market, this idea makes more sense to me to drive euphoria, but there's no guarantee that that has to happen, right? Money could continue to just flow into AI stocks or technology stocks, as they have been doing recently. So anyways, this is an idea that I was just playing with. I thought it was kind of interesting, and I personally haven't done a lot of drawing on my chart with the cycle analysis, even though I see a lot of people doing it. And so I'm well aware of the different ideas. I just thought it'd be something I would play with and see how it comes out. If you guys have ideas about that, leave them in the comments. I'm kind of curious what everybody's opinion on this idea is. I haven't seen too many people talking about the potential of a left translated cycle and that playing into the current price action if we've already topped in the current cycle. And I could definitely see people using that as an argument to then say the super cycle is started and we're going to continue going up forever, and then we see that euphoria coming in. So any ideas about that, put them in the comment. I thought it was an interesting concept, so thought I'd play with a little bit. All right, peace out, quants.